Book 2, The Island Adventurers, Chapter 9 of the Book of Missionary Heroes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Maggie Travers. The Book of Missionary Heroes by Basil Mathews. Chapter 9, The Canoe of Adventure. Elikana. Date of incident, 1861. I know not where his islands lift their fronded palms in air. I only know I cannot drift beyond his love and care. Manihiki Island looked like a tiny anchored canoe far away across the Pacific as Elikana glanced back from his place at the tiller. He sang, meantime, quietly to himself an air that still rang in his ears, the tune that he and his brother islanders had sung in praise of the power and providence of God at the services on Manihiki. For the Christian people of the Penrhyn group of the South Sea Islands had come together in April 1861 for their yearly meeting, paddling from the different quarters in their canoes through the white surge of the breakers that thundered day and night round the island. Elikana looked ahead to where his own island of Rakahanga grew clearer every moment on the skyline ahead of them, though each time his craft dropped into the trough of the sea between the green curves of the league-long ocean rollers the island was lost from sight. He and his 6 companions were sailing back over the 30 miles between Manihiki and Rakahanga, 2 of the many little lonely islands that studded the Pacific like stars. They sailed a strange craft, for it cannot be called a raft or a canoe or hut. It was all these and yet was neither. 2 canoes, 48 feet long, sailed side by side. Between the canoes were spars, stretching across from one to the other, lashed to each boat and making a platform between them 6 feet wide. On this was built a hut, roofed with the beautiful braided leaves of the cocoa-nut palm. Overhead stretched the infinite sky. Underneath lay thousands of fathoms of blue-green ocean, whose cold, hidden deeps among the mountains and valleys of the awful ocean under world held the strange goblin fish shapes. And on the surface this hut of leaves and bamboo swung dizzily between sky and ocean on the frail canoes. And in the canoes and the hut were 6 brown Rakahanga men, 2 women, and a chubby, dark-eyed child who sat contented and tired, being lapped to sleep by the swaying waters. Above them the great sail, made of matting of fiber, strained in the breeze that drove them nearer to the haven where they would be. Already they could see the gleam of the Rakahanga beach, with the rim of silver where the waves broke into foam. Then the breeze dropped. The fiber sail flapped uneasily against the mast, while the 2 little canvas sails hung loosely, as the wind, with little warning, swung round, and smiting them in the face began to drive them back into the ocean again. Elikana and his friends knew the sea almost like fish from the time they were babies, and they were little troubled by the turn of the breeze, save that it would delay their homecoming. They tried in vain to make headway. Slowly but surely they were driven back from land till they could see that there was no other thing but just to turn about and let her run back to Manihiki. In the canoes were enough cocoa-nuts to feed them for days if need be, and 2 large calabashes of water. The swift night fell, but the wind held strong, and 1 man sat at the tiller while 2 others bailed out the water that leaked into the canoes. They kept a keen watch, expecting to sight Manihiki, but when the dawn flashed out of the sky in the east, where the island should have been, there was neither Manihiki nor any other land at all. They had no chart, no compass. North and south and east and west stretched the wastes of the Pacific for hundreds of leagues. Only here and there in the ocean, and all unseen to them, like little groups of mushrooms on a limitless prairie, lay groups of islets. They might indeed sail for a year without ever sighting any land, and on one storm-driven wave of the great ocean could smite their little egg-shell craft to the bottom of the sea. They gathered together in the hut, and with anxious faces talked of what they might do. They knew that far off to the southwest lay the islands of Samoa and Rarotonga. So they set the bows of their craft southward. Morning grew to blazing noon, and fell to evening and night, and nothing did they see save the glittering, sparkling waters of the uncharted ocean, cut here and there by the cruel fin of a waiting shark. It was Saturday when they started, and night fell 7 times, while their wonderful hut boat crept southward along the water till the following Friday. Then the wind changed, and, springing up from the south, drove them wearily back once more in their tracks, and then bore them eastward. For another week they drove before the breeze, feeding on the coconuts, but the water in the calabashes was gone. Then on the morning of the second Friday, the 14th day of their sea wanderings, just when the sun in mid-heaven was blazing its noon heat upon them, and most of the little crew were lying under the shade of the hut, and the sail to doze away the hours of tedious hunger, they heard the cry of land, and leaping to their feet gazed ahead at the welcome sight. With sail and paddle they urged the craft on toward the island. Then night fell, and with it squalls of wind and rain came and buffeted them till they had to forsake the paddles for the bailing vessels to keep the boat afloat. Taking down the sails, they spread them flat to catch the pouring rain, and then poured this precious fresh water, true water of life to them, into their calabashes. But when morning came, no land could be seen anywhere. It was as though the island had been a land of enchantment and mirage, and now had faded away. Yet hope sprang in them erect and glad the next day, when land was sighted again. But the sea and the wind, as though driven by the spirits of contrariness, smote them back. For 2 more days they guided the canoe with the tiller, and tried to set her in one steady direction. Then, tired and out of heart, after 16 days of ceaseless and useless effort, they gave it up and let her drift, for the winds and the currents to take her where they would. At night, each man stood in his canoe, almost starving and parched with thirst, with aching back, stooping to dip the water from the canoe, and rising to pour it over the side. For hour after hour, while the calm moon slowly climbed the sky, each slaved at his dull task. Lulled by the heave and fall of the long-backed rollers as they slid under the keels of the canoes, the men nearly dropped asleep where they stood. The quiet waters crooned to them like a mother singing an old lullaby, crooned and called, till a voice deep within them said, "It is better to lie down and sleep and die than to live and fight and starve." Then a moan from the sleeping child, or a sight of a streaming ray of moonlight on the face of its mother, would send that nameless voice shivering back to its deep hiding place, and the man would stoop and bail again. Each evening as it fell saw their anxious eyes looking west and north and south for land, and always there was only the weary waste of waters. And as the sun rose, they hardly dared to open their eyes to the unbroken rim of blue-gray that circled them like a steel prison. They saw the thin edge of the moon grow to full blaze, and then fade to a corn-sickle again, as days and nights grew to weeks, and a whole month had passed. Every morning, as the pearl-gray sea turned to pink, and then to gleaming blue, they knelt on the raft between the canoes, and turned their faces up to their Father in prayer, and never did the sun sink behind the rim of waters without the sound of their voices rising into the limitless sky with thanks for safe keeping. Slowly the pile of coconuts lessened. Each one of them with its sweet milk and flesh was more precious to them than a golden chalice set with rubies. The drops of milk that dripped from them were more than ropes of pearls. At last 8 Sundays had followed one upon another, and now at the end of the day there was only the half of one cocoanut remaining. When that was gone, all would be over. So they knelt down under the cloudless sky on an evening calm and beautiful. They were on that invisible line in the great Pacific where the day ends and begins. those 7 on the tiny craft were, indeed, we cannot but believe, the last worshippers in all the great world house of God as Sunday drew to its end just where they were. Was it to be the last time that they would pray to God in this life? Prayer ended. Night was falling. Elkanah the leader, who had kept their spirits from utterly failing, stood up and gazed out with great anxious eyes before the last light should fall. "Look there upon the edge of the sea where the sun sets. It is—" He could hardly dare to believe that it was not the mirage of his weary brain. But one and another, and then all peered out through the swiftly warning light and saw that indeed it was land. Then a squall of wind sprang up, blowing them away from the land. Was this last hope, by a fine ecstasy of torture, to be dangled before them and then snatched away? But with the danger came the help. With the wind came the rain, cool, sweet, refreshing, life-giving water. Then the squall of wind dropped and changed. They hoisted the one sail that had not blown to tatters and drove for land. Yet their most awful danger still lay before them. The roar of the breakers on the cruel coral reef caught their ears. But there was nothing for it but to risk the peril. They were among the breakers which caught and tossed them on like eggshells. The scourge of the surf swept them. A woman, a man, even the child, were torn from them and ground on the ghastly teeth of the coral. 5 were swept over with the craft into the still, blue lagoon, and landing they fell prone upon the shore, just breathing and no more, after the giant buffeting of the thundering rollers, following the long, slow starvation of their wonderful journey in the hut on the canoes among the waters of the wondrous isles. Wake the silver dusk returning, upon the beach of darkness brims, and the ships of sunrise burning, strands upon their eastern rims. Section 2. Thrown up by the ocean in the darkness like driftwood, Elkanah and his companions lay on the gray shore. Against the dim light of the stars and beyond the beach of darkness they could see the fronds of the palms waving. The 5 survivors were starving, and the green coconuts hung above them, filled with food and drink. But their bodies, broken and tormented as they were by hunger and the battering breakers, refused even to rise and climb for the food that meant life. So they lay there as though dead. Over the ridge of the beach came a man. His pale copper skin shone in the fresh sunlight of the morning. His quick black eyes were caught by the sight of the torn clothing hanging on a bush. Moving swiftly down the beach of pounded coral, he saw a man lying with arms thrown out, face downward. Turning the body over, Ch11 found that the man was dead. Taking the body in his arms, he staggered with it up the beach, and placed it under the shade of the trees. Returning, he found the living 5. Their gaunt bodies and the broken craft on the shore told him without words the story of their long drifting over the wilderness of the waters. Without stopping to waste words in empty sympathy with starving men, Ch11 ran to the nearest coconut tree, and climbing it, threw down luscious nuts. Those below quickly knocked off the tops, drank deep draughts of the cool milk, and then ate. Coming down again, Ch11 kindled a fire and soon had some fish grilling for these strange wanderers thrown up on the tiny islet. They had no time to thank him before he ran off and swiftly paddled to Mathews, the island where he lived, to tell the story of these strange castaways. He came back with other helpers in canoes, and the 5 getting aboard were swiftly paddled to Mathews. As the canoes skimmed over the surface of the great lagoon, Elkanah and his friends could see, spread out in the great semicircle that stretched to the horizon, the long, low coral islets crowned with palms which form part of the Ellice Islands. The islanders, men, women, and children, ran down the beach to see the newcomers, and soon had set apart huts for them and made them welcome. Elikana gathered them round him and began to tell them about the love of Jesus and the protecting care of God the Father. It all seemed strange to them, but quickly they learned from him, and he began to teach them and their children. This went on for 4 months, till one day Elikana said, "I must go away and learn more so that I can teach you more." But they had become so fond of Elikana that they said, "No, you must not leave us." And it was only when he promised to come back with another teacher to help him that they could bring themselves to part with him. So when a ship came to the island to trade in coconuts, Elikana went aboard and sailed to Samoa, to the London Missionary Society's training college there at Malua. "A ship! A ship!" The cry was taken up through the island, and the people running down the beach saw a large sailing vessel. Boats were put down, and sculls flashed as sailors pulled swiftly to the shore. They landed, and the people gathered round to see and to hear what they would say. "Come on to our ship," said these men, who had sailed there from Peru, "and we will show you how you can be rich with many knives and much calico." But the islanders shook their heads and said that they would stay where they were. Then a wicked white man named Tom Rose, who lived on the island and knew how much the people were looking forward to the day when Elikana would come back to teach them, went to the traders and whispered what he knew to them. So the Peruvian traders, with craft shining in their eyes, turned again to the islanders and said, "If you will come with us, we will take you where you will be taught all that men can know about God." At this the islanders broke out into glad cries, and speaking to one another said, "Let us go and learn these things." The day came for sailing, and as the sun rose, hundreds of brown feet were running to the beach, children dancing with excitement, women saying good-bye to their husbands, men who for the first time in all their lives were to leave their tiny islet for the wonderful world beyond the ocean. So 200 of them went on board. The sails were hoisted, and they went away never to return, sailed away not to learn of Jesus, but to the sting of the lash and the shattering bullet, the bondage of the plantations, and to the death at the hands of those merciless beasts of prey, the Peruvian slavers. Years passed, and a little 50-ton trading vessel came to anchor outside the reef. One man, and then another, and another, got down into the little boat and pulled for the shore. Elikana had returned. The women and children ran down to meet him, but few men were there, for nearly all had gone. "Where is this one? Where is the other?" cried Elikana, with sad face as he looked around on them. "Gone, gone," came the answer. "Carried away by the man-stealing ships." Elikana turned to the white missionary who had come with him to ask what they could do. "We will leave Joan and his wife here," replied Mr. Murray. So a teacher from Samoa stayed there and taught the people, while Elikana went to begin work in an island nearby. Today, a white lady missionary has gone to live in the Ellice Islands, and the people are Christians, and no slave trader can come to snatch them away. So there sailed over the waters of the wondrous isles first the boat of sunrise, and then the ship of darkness, and last of all the ship of the peace of God. The ship of darkness had seemed for a time to conquer, but her day is now over, and today on that beach, as the sunlight brims over the edge of the sea, and a new Lord's Day dawns, you may hear the islanders sing their praise to the light of the world, who shines upon them and keeps them safe. End of chapter 9. Recording by Maggie Travers.